program today, we're going to be talking about milking sheep and basically what breed you should be having. Everybody automatically thinks that you're going to have East Friesians, but that's not necessarily the case, but most of them do have East Friesian blood in the line. This week people are talking about the fact that Fonterra is in trouble in China again. This time their Chinese partners have been repackaging their product and selling it well after the best buy date. Modifications of the Dairy Industry Restructuring Act is under the spotlight again, and there's still no sign of any deregulation. The On-Side app for farm safety has just won an innovation award. Mud Brick Wines have just won their supreme prize for the Canterbury A&P Show's wine contest. Reports are out, we're talking about reducing the emissions as far as agriculture is concerned, and 3,825 square kilometres of new broadband coverage. Now apparently the figure is that's 450,000 rugby fields. Exactly. Also the Wallabies coach, No, I'm not going to go there. But in just a minute, we will go to insurance and sickness versus ACC. And sickness cover versus ACC. There's obviously an imbalance there.
Yes, there is, and that's sort of changed a little bit in more recent times. I think in order to understand that properly, we need to understand what's defined by an accident. And in general terms, and there are exceptions to this, but in general terms, an accident is where there is a specific incident on a specific day at a specific time that's caused a specific injury directly. That's an accident. Fall over, break a leg, it's an accident. ACC take both responsibility or liability for the medical procedures around that, and there are a little bit of exceptions to that, as well as a loss of income, a compensation. One of the reasons that ACC started in the first place was because it's a no-blame system. It means that people can't sue other people who may be responsible for that injury because it is a specific incident, if that makes sense. Now, if it falls outside of that, it's illness, and illness is not in any way the responsibility of ACC or the Accident Compensation Corporation, both in terms of the medical procedures that may need to be done or the loss of income as a result of that ailment, if that makes sense.
Can you be a bit specific, Barbara Lee, about some of the sicknesses that are covered?
Well, ACC doesn't cover any sicknesses. It's accident-based only. So to have a good contract around an illness and an injury, you want something that's going to pick up issues like mental health. That's stress.
Mental health?
Yes, stress, anxiety, depression. That's a big risk for somebody that's particularly self-employed people. So
my instant reaction was surprise, because you think of this sickness being heart, lungs, brain tumour, whatever, but
anything that you go to the doctor for and the doctor says, look, you can't work for whatever reason, that's covered in your illness and injury contract.
Because depression does stop people working.
It sure does. It can have a big effect on their ability to work.
And that's under your sickness and accident.
That's right. So we have covers that can pay people every month until they're able to go back to work. There's many types of covers in there, and it's just important that they're matched up with the person for the occupation, for their individual needs.
And coming back to you, I guess self-employed people invariably don't take much of a disposable income, and so ACC rub their hands in glee.
Well, I don't know whether they do that. They just it's just quite clear. I don't think rubbing their hands in glee is quite fair. ACC is based around 80% of an individual's taxed income. Really simple if you're on a salary or a waged earner. If you're on 100 grand a year, you get 80,000 for the sake of keeping it simple. That's taxed, so ACC tax that as it's earned, so it's under the same PAYE system that they would as an employee. When you're in a self-employed person who takes drawings, of course you furnish your tax return at the end of the year, and that tax return mitigates certain expenses. So it does not necessarily reflect on what that person brings into the business or what they're responsible for the revenue that they generate. So ACC just compensate them based on 80% of their individual earnings. So again, if you take the $100,000, for example, that a self-employed person brings in, and then he is entitled to take his work-related expenses off that. It might be running a vehicle, it might be his computer expenses, there might be a number of things that are in there. And ultimately, he might pay tax on, say, $60,000 because he's had $40,000 worth of expenses. So his ACC entitlement then is 80% of $60,000. And it's taxed before he gets it, which is, and most self-employed people, they're not used to that. They're used to getting a tax bill, not taken out before they get that. So in the end, what they're bringing in is an awful lot less than what they were if they were on ACC.
So, Barbara Lee, that means basically that if they insure themselves, rather than relying on ACC, that it's a better package because they can dictate how much they do need.
Oh, absolutely. They're in control then. So covers like medical cover, so you're not on a waiting list, or you might want access to drugs that Pharmac don't fund. And then your income type covers are going to pay you every month. So if the doctor, it's as simple as, if the doctor says you can't work, signs you off, not able to work, then we'll just pay every month. I think if anyone's ever had a situation where they've been in a hospital with somebody, and you go into that hospital and, the people are in there for an accident or an illness, and you see how, it's quite imbalanced, isn't it? ACC people are being sort of taken care of, and those that have an illness, what's available to them is quite restricted, sometimes nothing. And there is a real imbalance there, and the best way to keep that even is to take control yourself.
Is there enough in an insurance policy to do that, or do you still get topped up by ACC?
There's enough in an insurance policy. So if a person has an accident and they have a private medical insurance, ACC takes the first claim, it takes the first responsibility, liability. But often we have claims where there's some form of surgery where it could be ACC and private medical insurance on a joint venture. Once again, it's about funding and timing, and often with ACC, certain specialists get certain funding at certain times of the year, and they have to fit their allocated procedures around that funding. So if they're coming near the end of their funding and they're running out of money, then they'll bump it to the following financial portion, if you like. Whereas if it's a joint venture between ACC and the private medical insurer, then it can be done at a lesser cost to the ACC, and therefore the procedure can be speeded up quite a bit. It happens quite often.
See, I talk a wee bit about my own personal situation. I lifted some bits and pieces when I was shifting back into my house and got a hernia, and ACC said no, that wasn't an accident. So, but luckily I had health insurance. So, and that's this. I mean, you can't. What I'm trying to say is, I wouldn't. If I'd relied on ACC, I'd probably still have a hernia.
Yeah, there are some things that have changed over the years. So, once upon a time, work-related issues such as we used to call it occupational overuse syndrome, like carpal tunnel, hernia, all those sorts of things. ACC have become a lot more stricter on those and saying, well, actually, they're not as a result of an accident. They're just a result of wearing out. Now, that might be a combination between what you do in your personal life and what you do in your work life. So it's not necessarily just a work-related incident. However, there are exceptions to that. So there are some things that ACC accept that it is long-term work-related, and therefore they will take some responsibility. But yes, they've become a little bit stricter on that. And to some degree, I think that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think that it's become more defined.
But
In my case, it was
Sorry, I think if you want certainty around anything, you've got to take control, haven't you? You have to put your own plan in place.
That's right.
And then you know exactly what's going to happen if you do have any types of events.
I'm going to be quite pointed and say that by the sound of it, there's so many exceptions, Barbara Lee, that you need actually to talk to somebody like either of you two. Because
That's right.
you actually know, it's like a farm accountant, isn't it?
That's right. The advice process is where, that people get value out of. We have access to all companies and we give independent free advice. It's awesome, isn't it?
There's a bit of a trend to buy off television now. You look at a television ad and they say, hey, give us a ring and sign up, or just send us a text and or an email and we can do you for that.
It's not that easy, really. At the end of the day, we talked before about how you can get, income compensation around depression or mental health issues. And there is a large proportion of claims around mental health issues. A lot of that's proportionate around the occupational classifications. So professional people, dare I say it, accountants, lawyers, those sorts of people have a far higher claim rate for depression than, say, your builder, who's got a far higher claim rate for things like accidents or getting worn out, basically. So when you've had one of those issues, of course, then because it's such a high claimed, it's so much harder to get that covered going forward. So the longer you leave it and the longer more issues that you have, the harder it is to get good and complete cover.
Brilliant. Thank you both. And obviously you go to somebody who does actually know. And speaking of that, in just a moment or two, we're going to be talking farm accounting.
Not sure how to brighten up your backyard? Try Grow Sure Easy Flowers, all in one mix. Seed, feed, mulch. It's bloomin' easy. Be sure with Grow Sure from Kiwi Care.
Everybody has a story to tell. What's yours? Maybe your family has been farming the land for 5 generations. Perhaps you have invented the next best thing in agriculture, or maybe something else. Whatever your story, if you're out on the land, we want to hear from you. Get in touch by emailing us at info@ontheland.co.nz.
You know that saying, content is king? Well, in today's mixed media world, it's true. You need video, audio, photos and more for social media, for marketing, for communications, sales and for advertising. And you need this at a price that works with your budgets. Well, that's what we do. At Tandem, we partner with you to create the content that you can use to shout to the world or video link to a few. Connect with us and we'll help you connect to the world.
We're living on a planet facing almost insurmountable challenges. Challenges we have to face sooner rather than later. The world needs our energy. She needs our ideas, our passion. It's up to us to change things, make a positive change to the planet, to feed the world, to protect the future, to live well, to be the generation that will make a change. Join us.
A lot of people will talk to you about the problems of farming, and I don't mean the actual weather, I don't mean the fact the elements are against you, but all this bureaucracy that is not only sneaking in, it's actually arriving at about 140 miles an hour. Now, if you look, for example, at the environmental farm plans, you've actually got to, provide exactly what's happened with each paddock over the last how many years. You've also got to be able to say how many stock units you have carried over through the winter. You've actually also got to talk about all your irrigation and your rainfall and the whole. So basically the bureaucrats have come up with this amazing big long list of compliance. If you don't do it, you're in deep trouble. So basically what we're looking at as far as the farming community is concerned is a huge amount of accountability. Luckily, there are some people out there who can give you a hand. And I know, for example, here in Canterbury, that ECAN have got special officers who will actually come out and guide you through. The next thing, which is, I think, by the end of January next year, is a consent to farm. You're going to have to get a consent from your regional council so that you can continue farming. I would suggest very strongly that there'll be some farmers who are heading towards retirement age who are going to say, this is too hard. Seriously, you've got your farm environmental plans, which are going to take you ages and ages and ages to do, and then you've actually got to explain to your regional councils why and how you are going to be farming on your land. Now, some of these farms, I'm talking here about 4 or 5 generations, and people have been doing wonderful things. I know we need accountability. I know that we need, when we're exporting things, that people need to know where it's been and where it's come from and what chemicals are used. But really? IRD and expense claims.
Yeah, a bit of an interesting situation, this one. Basically, for a number of decades now, farmers have had certain claims for their home and the use of the home, and they've been automatic, and even all the accountants around New Zealand have been using it. They've now come out with a draft interpretation statement. So basically, they're trying to hit an industry that I think's down, and really put the boot in. And what they're trying to say is the automatic 25% claim that you've had, we're not going to allow that anymore. We're going to reduce that, and they're looking at making it 15%.
That's going to make a big difference to a lot of people because that is the office.
Yeah, exactly. This is the thing. Farmers use their home as more than just the office. It's for everything. And IRD really haven't even taken that into account. They've just gone on, I think, looked at it and thought, right, how can we increase the revenue base? Let's just slash that down. It's always been a given that farmers get that 25%. But to go from 25 down to 15 makes a big difference to the bottom line for some farmers.
Will that include GST? Because I think some things are GST-able for the one.
Yeah, so what it basically means that 25% of any home expenses, so your insurance, your repairs, those sort of things, you'll only be able to claim the 15% overall and then only get GST on that 15% portion. Whereas at the moment you get 25% on the, as a claim for GST purposes.
When does it start?
At the moment it's a draft statement, so they're out there looking for people to comment.
There'll be quite a few accountants.
Yeah, well, the moment I read it, it wound me up because there's no justification in any of the documents that they've put out. They've just come out and said, we're going to reduce it. We think it needs to be done. And if they do get their way, it'll kick in for the 17-18 tax year. So it's not very far away at all. But just on top of it, they're also going to try and look at the home phone. At the moment, you get a 100% claim. They want to go ahead and actually make that down to 50% as well. So they're trying to cut everywhere. The downside is that for most farmers, it'll cost them more in the long run. Not only tax, but also accountant doing the books because they'll have to get in there and fiddle with all the telephone and work out what's personal and business, etc. Whereas at the moment, you can just put it through. So a lot more work for everybody if they have their way.
Employment breaches, they still continue to happen.
Yeah, the agriculture industry just seem to be carrying on. They're just one after another at the moment. So we've had a strawberry farmer up north come out and been fined $6,000 because he didn't meet the employee's minimum rights, so no written agreement, didn't keep holiday records and leave records, etc. For some reason, the agriculture industry just doesn't get their heads around it, and they really need to step up. The labour inspectors have come out and said they're going to keep an eye on, especially this, because it's coming up to picking season for the strawberry farmers. And if they see this sort of thing going on, they're going to clamp down straight away because it's just an ongoing issue, and it's not just that industry, it's across the whole agricultural sort of sector.
So this is different to somebody going through a claims court because they think they were dismissed unfavourably.
Yeah, very different. This is basically the employer not doing what they're supposed to do. So they've got to give everyone a written employment agreement, pay them a minimum wage, keep record of their holidays, make those records available. This is the things they're not doing. So they just completely ignored it, started paying some people to work on the farm basically, and didn't do the rest of this behind the scenes stuff because probably too time consuming for them and can't be bothered, hoping they'll never get caught.
But they will be.
Yeah, and it's just now that this has been reflagged and there's been a few other cases that have come out where employers aren't doing their thing, you can expect there'll be more and more coming.
Who's tipping IRD off? Is it?
Well, in this case, it was the workers themselves. They put the complaint through that they weren't getting their agreements, they weren't aware of their holiday entitlements, and they couldn't even get evidence of what holidays they had and what they're entitled to. So they were the ones that started doing the complaining. They're obviously quite clued up on that. But a lot of the workers would just sort of carry on as if it was the norm.
Well, the workers may not know themselves, of course.
Well, exactly, yeah. But as an employer, you've got to do your legal responsibilities. You can't sort of sidestep them.
And then there's KiwiSaver.
Yeah, well, KiwiSaver on top of all that you got to do. So really, it's a case of if you're taking on staff, even if they're only seasonal workers, put a call into the accountant. The accountants know it all, and they can guide you through that process, so you can avoid these fines and all these prosecutions that are happening.
Some accountants, or I know, will actually do the payroll.
Yeah, we do that for a lot of people, and all accountants are set up for it. They'll either do it in-house for you, or they can help you with an option that you can do it yourself, depending on which way you want to go. In reality, it's more cost effective for your accountant to do it because there's less chance of mistakes being made, especially around the holiday leave and your KiwiSaver calculations, those sort of things. And
there's computer systems?
There's a lot of computer options out there. There's some where they're actually on the computer, what they call a desktop solution, or there's some in the cloud where it's all over the internet. So it's just a matter of talking to your accountant, finding out what they recommend and what's going to meet your needs.
Now, the dairy industry, they seem to be getting whipped left, right and centre.
Yeah, well, we just obviously had the government come out and just make the announcement that the primary sector committee are going to look at just keeping an eye on the competition in the future and sort of ramping that up a wee bit. Really, the consumers are going to be the winners in the long run. The farmers are still going to carry on farming as they are, but it's just to make sure that competition's out there and there's a lot of brands and product out there to compare and everyone wins sort of thing.
Is that sort of heading towards deregulation?
Yeah, they're going to be sort of looking at the Dairy Industry Restructuring Act, making sure that Fonterra can have discretion around and say the shareholders they want to take on. There's some things around there, and just sort of making rules around who gets the milk from Fonterra, etc.
Because that was set up in 2001, so it's probably ready for a revamp.
Well, yeah, the South Island one is about to expire, so they're doing this before it expires and gets it all sort of lined up, ready for the next year, few years ahead, basically.
Speaking of dairying, you've got a lot of immigrants coming in to work on dairy farms. That's in itself a minefield for an employer.
Yes, not only do you have your employer responsibility, you also got to think about their requirements where they can actually work here. So work visas and those sort of things are important to check out. And there's I know there's a publication out there that's available for dairy farms to actually download off the internet, which talks all about it just for the industry.
Because there seems to be, but from my observation, a big trend towards using immigrants.
Yeah, I think that's based because they do the work.
Without putting too fine a point on
well,
it.
it is.
No, but I mean, you did right. You talk to a dairy farmer, and the first thing they'll say is that the Kiwis don't want to do it. They probably smoke pot, and they really don't like getting out of bed. So
yeah,
they go,
exactly. Whereas the immigrant workers, they'll get up, they'll do it because they want to get that money so they can send it back home to their families and get ahead. That's just the pure reality of it.
Well, it is really, which is good. So the immigration, and then of course you've also got, as I understand, health cover and things for them if they were to.
Yeah, there's a lot of things as an employer that you need to be sort of looking at. You want to really make sure you look after them because a lot of things can go wrong. So it's pays to check all those boxes and get them sort of lined up before they get on the farm.
Do you get involved with how good the accommodation is and all that sort of thing?
Not quite that level, but we do give a bit of a guideline as to what the minimum requirements are, and it's got to be reasonable for them. You don't expect sort of 5-star, but you don't want to give them
the dog kennels.
Exactly.
Without breeding. Yeah, yes. Exactly. And so basically, for dairy farmers, and a lot of them aren't making any money. How's that looking? Are you getting through that?
Yeah, most of them are hanging in there. The doom and gloom that was there in the past probably has moved on. Farmers are optimistic that it's going to come right. They're out there doing it. They're loving what they're doing. They wouldn't do anything else.
Resilience.
And they just know that at some point they'll start making money again.
Thanks very much indeed. In just a moment or two, we'll be talking to Tony Daveron about the season and about a few of the consents that you now have to do.
Not sure how to brighten up your backyard? Try Grow Sure Easy Flowers, all in one mix. Seed, feed, mulch. It's bloomin' easy. Be sure with Grow Sure from Kiwi Care.
Everybody has a story to tell. What's yours? Maybe your family has been farming the land for 5 generations. Perhaps you have invented the next best thing in agriculture, or maybe something else. Whatever your story, if you're out on the land, we want to hear from you. Get in touch by emailing us at info@ontheland.co.nz.
You know that saying, content is king? Well, in today's mixed media world, it's true. You need video, audio, photos and more for social media, for marketing, for communications, sales and for advertising. And you need this at a price that works with your budgets. Well, that's what we do. At Tandem, we partner with you to create the content that you can use to shout to the world or video link to a few. Connect with us and we'll help you connect to the world.
We're living on a planet facing almost insurmountable challenges. Challenges we have to face sooner rather than later. The world needs our energy. She needs our ideas, our passion. It's up to us to change things, make a positive change to the planet, to feed the world, to protect the future, to live well, to be the generation that will make a change. Join us.
Beef breeding, you're into the Limousins.
Yeah. Again, coming from the UK, Limousin is the main breed of beef cattle, so it's just ingrained in me. A lot of people in New Zealand have got the negative connotation still with Limousin, which is a shame because they've come on hugely, and docility has been a big factor that they've worked on. But I'm a firm fan of Limousin, always have been. Won't change that. They sell well in the market. We've had some very good prices at Canterbury Park when we've taken a few in there. Again, though, we've just got small numbers. We had a reasonable sort of herd up in Marlborough, but they weren't pedigree. So what we've decided is we've whittled those out, and we're, as we said, like with the Holstein, we're just starting again and being very choosy where we get our genetics from.
Trying to get a quiet one's a bit of a problem.
It is, yeah. All jokes aside, there was some big issues, and some of the original cattle that we had they were far from docile. But like I say, the progress that's been made recently and the genetics that are being brought in, docility is a huge factor now. And I would actually challenge some of the other breeders of some of the more traditional breeds to say that some of our genetics are as good, if not more docile.
That really is going to be a hard hill to climb though, isn't it?
It is. It's one of those things. It takes a long time to get a stigma off of a breed, but what's been really encouraging is having been present at some of the recent Limousin conferences, we've had external speakers coming in, people that are based in the beef industry as general and having involved with other breeds, and their comments are very positive. Very positive. They're actually saying that as a breed we're making huge progress, and the docility and the temperament of the cattle is second to none.
How do the New Zealand cattle compare to the UK?
Yeah, it's a numbers thing. Limousin is still relatively small numbers, but it's improving. So yeah, we haven't got that depth over here. Obviously, the depth of breeding that we have in the UK for the Limousin cattle is huge. It's like, if you go to an Angus sale over here, you've got that tremendous depth, generations and generations of breeders. It's coming, but the beauty now is that we've got access to overseas semen, so there's nothing stopping us bringing those good genetics in. But it's just making sure that working with the AI companies to make sure that they are breeding in the genetics, bringing in the genetics that we need.
Do you see them being used as a terminal sire?
They've got lots of potential uses, and I think this is the thing, probably as an organisation, I mean, we're relatively new to Limousin, New Zealand, but there's huge potential. They're tremendous growth rate, good carcass, they're really good as a cross, especially on other beef breeds, but even in the dairy industry. Again, going back to England, Limousin is the main breed over dairy cattle, just for easy calving, and then you've got a good saleable calf at the end of it.
What about yield?
Yeah, they grow. I mean, our limos on this pasture will grow phenomenally well, but even on hill country, I think it's standard recognised now that 60% with your carcass meat that you're getting, and they grow quick. So yeah, I personally, I'm probably a bit one-eyed, but I can't fault them.
Well, most stud breeders are pretty one-eyed about their stock.
Yeah, absolutely. We have to be, don't you? You're passionate about what you do. I'm not so one-eyed that I don't look at other breeds. I mean, the calves that I buy in, I'm looking for Angus cross and Hereford cross because that is the recognised breeds of New Zealand. I'm not, it's horses for courses. Like the old saying, when in Rome, do as Romans do. But when it comes to actual breeding, though. Yeah, the Limousin for me is the breed.
Is it an up and coming breed? Do you see people getting into it?
Yeah, I think so. I can definitely see a big future in it. We're heading in the right direction. We've got some excellent breeders locally. Obviously, being in Canterbury, we're very fortunate. We've got some good local breeders. We've got Gary Kennett, the president, just around the corner from us here, and then there's Warwick James, excellent stock. They've got some great stock over there as well. So yeah, we just recently brought a couple of his heifers, so plug for Warwick.
Tony, the season?
Oh, it's been a relatively kind season really so far. A little bit on probably the little cooler side. A little bit of frost around, and I'm sure you've had somebody talk to you about the frost. And we keep getting these little bits of rainfall that keep topping up the soil moisture, doing diddly squat to the groundwater system, but it has been helping out those people that A, might not have any groundwater, particularly this year for irrigation, and also for those that are on that have got very low water levels, and we do have very low water levels. Excuse me, pretty much all over Canterbury, groundwater levels are relatively low, and the storages that are in the ground, of course, then mean that when you've got low water levels, you're going to have some self-limiting bores, so you probably won't be able to pump all of the water that you would otherwise be able to pump. I mean, I know of a couple of people that have had to cut back from sort of that 80 litres a second in their bores back to about 60, so they're 20 litres a second down already, because if they switch on and take the full 80, then the water levels drop to the point they go out on low water level. So we know those problems exist out there right now, but the weather we've been having is really very favourable in terms of the irrigators, because we really haven't had to do any significant irrigation to date.
So there are those, though, that are starting with no access to water.
Yes, there are a whole bunch of people that have consents, what we call the adaptive management consents. They were granted back in the 2005 to 2008 period of earlier this decade, where if water levels aren't above a certain point, a certain level in their bores on the 1st of September, then they have either no access or restricted access to water, and a large proportion of those adaptive management consents are without water for the 2016-17 irrigation season at the moment. We were sort of hoping that maybe September would have brought some significant rainfall, or maybe even October brought some significant rainfall and raised the groundwater levels, but they haven't. So those people are looking down the barrel at no irrigation water for the season. So they've been very fortunate to date that we haven't had to do very much in the way of irrigation.
Pretty expensive exercise, because you're paying for that right, and then they take it away from you.
Yeah, I mean, when we went through, we was one of those expert witnesses that went for the farmers when we went through these hearings with Environment Canterbury. They got access to water in some years, or most of the years that we modelled, but they knew at the time that this would come around again. And this is, very much a mirror image of what happened in the early 2000s. So if you go back to the early 2000s, leading up to 2005-06, we had three winters in a row where we got very, very little rainfall recharge. We depend to a large extent for irrigation water in groundwater on rainfall recharge, and we do on most of the alluvial plains in New Zealand. So the Heratonga Plains to a slightly lesser extent, but the Wairau Plains, parts of the Wairarapa, we depend very much on getting that rainfall recharge during the winter, and that didn't occur in those times. And if you look at the 2013, 14 and 15, 2014, 15 and 16 winters, we had virtually no groundwater recharge at all from rainfall. So it's sort of like the perfect storm in a way: low rainfall recharge, high demand, high irrigation demand. Because if you look at the 14-15 season and the 15-16 season, they were relatively high irrigation demand seasons, and the groundwater levels are really low. And the perfect storm has occurred again 10 years after we went through all the hearings.
Farm environmental plans.
Yeah, most farmers are aware that these are required. You need to do a farm environmental plan. It's not as daunting as a lot of people think it is. It's about really just recording all the things that you've done on the farm. So basically recording your rainfall and your soil types and the type of farming you've got, the type of irrigation you're using, getting an overseer modelling done to set your base levels for your nutrients, so you know what you need to achieve in the future as far as nutrient losses are, particularly nitrate to groundwater. So it's a gathering together of records, and the hardest thing for some of the farmers is that they don't have those records. They haven't kept a record of A, when they put fertiliser on, B, how much they put on, who put it on, what form it was, how many lambs, for example, they might have carried over in the winter, which paddocks they were on, what they were eating, how much supplement was brought in. So it's forming the cornerstone of the nutrient management program, and you know, farmers and everybody alike are on board with that. I mean, you know, we want our streams to be cleaner than they are. We want to reduce the nitrates. If we can save on the stuff going out into the groundwater, then that's a saving for the farm as well. So, I mean, there's benefits in this, but it's, you know, the time is nigh. We need to have got these things done, and it is impressing upon people the necessity really to keep much better records than we have in the past of what we actually do, and where it actually happened on the farm. Yeah.
So if they haven't done them, where do they get that?
Oh, they get them done. If they're in a scheme, for example, in an irrigation scheme like the Waimakariri scheme or the Ashburton Lyndhurst, then within those schemes they've got somebody in there that's preparing farm environmental plans. You can get them done by your fertiliser reps. There's a bunch of agricultural consultants out there that are doing farm environmental plans.
So people aren't on their own?
No, they're not on their own at all. No, not at all.
Good. Consents to farm.
That's the next issue in front of farmers in some of the zones and some of the groundwater zones in Canterbury, and I think you can be assured that what happens in the Canterbury region. I mean, we're pretty much leading the way in New Zealand of where things are going. There will be a requirement, or there is going to be a requirement, to get a land use consent to be able to farm. And that's a step on from the farm environmental management plan. So it's about consenting the activities that you're going to do as far as farming is concerned, and that cornerstone farm environmental plan forms the basis for that. So it's how you're going to put your fertiliser on, what sort of stocking numbers you're going to have, what your nutrient losses are likely to be, and staying within those conditions of the land use consent.
And that's real heavy bureaucracy, because you've got to do it.
You've got to do it. It's in the plan. It's already in the plan that's operative, the land and water plan that's operative, and it's just a little bit out there in the future, but it's there, and they're there to stay. And unless there's a plan change, which would seem highly unlikely, then it's there to stay, and they're going to have to be done.
And you can't get away with it, Tony, isn't it? Thank you.
That's right.
Just a moment or two, we're going to be talking about milking sheep and basically what breed is the best, or what combination would work the best.
You know that saying, content is king? Well, in today's mixed media world, it's true. You need video, audio, photos and more for social media, for marketing, for communications, sales and for advertising. And you need this at a price that works with your budgets. Well, that's what we do. At Tandem, we partner with you to create the content that you can use to shout to the world or video link to a few. Connect with us and we'll help you connect to the world.
We're living on a planet facing almost insurmountable challenges. Challenges we have to face sooner rather than later. The world needs our energy. She needs our ideas, our passion. It's up to us to change things. Make a positive change to the planet, to feed the world, to protect the future, to live well, to be the generation that will make a change. Join us.
Everybody has a story to tell. What's yours? Maybe your family has been farming the land for 5 generations. Perhaps you have invented the next best thing in agriculture, or maybe something else. Whatever your story, if you're out on the land, we want to hear from you. Get in touch by emailing us at info@ontheland.co.nz.
Not sure why your camellias aren't cooperating? Try Grow Sure Planting Magic, packed full of nutrients in just one handful. Be sure with Grow Sure from Kiwi Care.
You're not dealing with straight East Frisians.
No, we initially thought we were going to, and we brought probably the only East Frisian cross sheep I've seen for sale in Christchurch. They were Poll Dorset East Frisian cross sheep, cast for age. So we bought them as our nucleus flock about 5 years ago, and We did buy an East Region ram put over then, but we quickly became aware that the pinkness of the East Region Poll Dorset was a liability in this climate. They got melanomas, skin cancers on the older ewes was becoming apparent, and that spread to udders and eyes and things like that. So we realised we needed to get a darker breed of sheep that wouldn't impact negatively impact on productivity, but also impact on getting a darker skin pigment. So we initially went to an Awasi. We got one from the Endangered Species Farm and used him over the flock. He has, as all Awasi, most Awasis do anyway, that I'm aware of, has very bad feet. So we got enough genetics out of him to get an infusion through the flock, and that did darken them up, but the feet issue was an issue. Miles King, who's got a breed in the Wairarapa, which has just been registered as a new breed called Dairy Mead, which is basically an East Region based breed, but with an infusion of New Zealand genetics. We went to Miles and got 2 black rams a few years ago, 3 years ago now, and so we're now in the process of converting our whole flock to a black flock with an infusion of Awasi and these black East Friesians. So at the moment, I suppose a quarter of the flock may be black, or moving towards black. Give it 5 years, I'd say, and the whole flock will be black. We're getting enough ewe lambs now that are black to make all our replacements black.
Are they good eating?
They are. There's no difference between an East Friesian meat and a meat breed, basically. If you were going for, especially when they get more mature, if you're going for a good conformation of an animal, you would say the East Friesian's got deficiencies. It is a leaner animal, longer, leaner animal, but certainly at the prime lamb stage, they're nice, round, plump lambs. They finish early, they grow fast, and they're as tender as any other sheep. But just as they get older, they get that longer, leaner body, a bit like comparing a Friesian cow to an Angus cow as they get older. But when they're young, they're nice, plump and round, and we've had no negative feedback from selling our cull lambs through the sale yards. We've actually topped the sale yards on occasion when we've sold them up there, so at Colgate. So yeah, we don't have any problems with them being treated as a meat, a triple purpose animal, meat, wool and milk. The wool part's a pretty minor part of the whole equation now, that is probably for most sheep farmers.
Now, you've dedicated a lot of time and money into it, but do you think there's a future for milking sheep in New Zealand?
Oh, I think it is. Keith Nayland, who's the principal of what's now Antares Ag, was Blue River. He said he felt New Zealand could support 5 million dairy sheep, and it was probably a figure he plucked out of the air, but it was based upon what he knew of the market overseas. And it was mainly into Taiwan at that stage, I believe. But New Zealand's probably the anomaly in that we don't have a culture of using sheep milk as part of our diet. Most other countries embrace sheep dairy products really well. New Zealand's the anomaly, not the other way around. And so, being an export country, I think we have a really good potential to move product offshore. And there's a whole lot of things that are occurring now that enhance that. Just straight economics of sheep farming. Sheep farming needs something else to make it more viable. Lamb prices are plateauing at where they are now, and it's basically at the vagaries of the dollar, whether they're good or bad. So you've got that, making sheep farmers looking for alternatives. You've got all the issues around nitrate leaching, particularly here in Canterbury, in the Selwyn district. Sheep dairy farming has a major issue with nitrate leaching. Our farm environmental plan for out here is 4 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare. ECAN want all farmers eventually to be 15 kilograms or lower. Most dairy farms are probably sitting around 35 kilograms, so there's a lot of movement to occur within the dairy industry to come down to reduce that nitrate. The sheep dairy industry, depending on what system you adopt, is already right down at the bottom level. So there's a whole lot of environmental issues that favour sheep dairy. Economically, it really stacks up. Internationally, they seem to be finding really good markets for it. That's all the word we're getting back. The bit we're lacking here in Canterbury is the lack of a processor of size that can take the volume to get it offshore, because the domestic market can only cope with so much, be it ice cream, yogurt or cheese. You know, there's a limited outlet there, and we'd hit that ceiling pretty quickly, I think. But once we can get into a decent export regime, I think it'll go ahead streets and bounds.
Dennis, October, you called it Ryegrass Month.
Yes, some people associate it with Oktoberfest, but if you're a ryegrass seed grower, you really need to have done some things already or do some things very soon for those crops, and things like putting the nitrogen on to really boost the tiller production away. If you haven't already done that, there doesn't seem to be any set rule. Some people put on something like 100 kgs per hectare per month for 3 months in a row. Others will dump on 300 kgs in one go if conditions are right, and the end result seems to be the same. So,
yeah, the cost is the same as well.
Yes, except that you're 3 times your application if you're paying a contractor to spread it on. So
that's the point.
That's the point. Yes, that's the point.
So what are the ideal conditions? You're talking about rain, or what?
Well, you obviously need with nitrogen, unless you're using one of the specialist ureas that will stand being put on in dry conditions and doesn't volatilise into the atmosphere. With urea, you definitely need probably a shower afterwards, ideally. You don't want it sort of it going onto wet, because sometimes nitrogen can stick to the leaf and actually burn a little hole in the leaf if it lodges in an axis and things like that. But certainly, a rain to activate it, and reasonable top growth as well.
Now, you've been an Aussie.
Yes, Rob, been over to Brisbane for the New Zealand Grain and Seed Trade conference, annual conference. It's the first time we've gone offshore, and it was really, really good. And they had a great host of very, very good speakers over there, some New Zealanders and some Australians. And in some ways, they've got their act together and in front of us, and other ways they're a little behind us in getting themselves organised. But certainly there were some very, very good speakers. We had New Zealand Trade and Industries Commissioner there from Melbourne, and he was really, really sharp, and we could be proud of him as our Trade Commissioner in Australia. Did a great job. Yep.
So what can we learn from the Aussies?
Well, certainly we had a nutritionist there from their grain industry, a nutritionist who talked about the importance of grain to the human health, and she was a practicing nutritionist, and said, well, we basically, we hear all about this gluten and all these sorts of intolerances and things like that, but grain is still a very, very important part of our diet, and very good for bowel health, of course, as we know that, and a certain amount of fibre that comes from that is absolutely essential. So keep those grain intakes, not so much the processed and sugared varieties, which we all, of course, like, but certainly...
You're talking white bread and things, aren't you, really?
Yes, or we're talking the brown bread and things like porridge and things like that.
Yeah.
They're all good.
As on the good side, rather.
On the good side, that's right.
Exactly.
Yes, indeed. So some interesting stuff there, and also their breeding programs over there. Looking at GE and the risks and options and possibilities there, but New Zealand and Australia have been tracking down the same track, but at the moment we've put the brakes on some certain things that the Australians haven't put the brakes on, and they're quite concerned that we may drift away and fall behind the world, basically, at our end. And so, yes, to sort of watch this space. We like to sort of have some people to work with, and the Australians are pretty good.
So you can hold hands with them.
Yes, indeed, and swap information. It's freely available for the good of mankind, basically, and there's not too much hidden stuff there, and collaboration.
Because it's interesting that FAR, who I know you champion, have got a foot into Australia as well.
Oh, absolutely, yes. They could see the benefits of being established in Australia, and joint collaboration and trials and things like that. And for instance, there's a rust nursery in Queensland that we can use. They have conditions and stress some of our new ryegrasses out and test them for resistance to rust, and lots of little things like that they've got. Maybe they need some things that we've got, and vice versa, working together.
Aphids, those pesky little things.
Well, they're due back, Rob. You can just about look at your calendar and say, you know, late October they'll be there, and just check your roses. That's the first port of call, and things like sow thistle and prairie grass. They're the first to succumb to aphid occupation. They must be their favourite foods, I think. And from there, you know, until it gets too hot, they really build up very, very, very quickly on lots and lots of crops. And of course, they do a lot of damage and inject viruses into plants and things like that. So they are one of our planet's most pesky little insects.
Now, spraying, you've got to be careful to get it all.
Absolutely, Rob. If you're spraying a paddock, particularly for diseases, rusts and the things like that, and you miss a pocket in a field, that can be a ready infection source from not even having to travel in from other fields or be blown in by the wind or transported by animals. Right from within your crop can be a hot spot and a major reinfection source. So it can mean that you may even have to spray for one extra time in a season because the infection came from within the field. So get those GPSs right, drive straight to your GPS and don't miss, paint the pictures out, don't miss any areas because they can be costly.
And avoid drift.
Absolutely avoiding drift and to neighbours and other crops, sensitive crops, and there's various ways you can do it. Anti-drift agents can be put in the mixture. Using air induction nozzles are absolutely brilliant. They use two forms of hydraulics, not only the water but the air as well, and you can produce a larger droplet and still get coverage without it drifting away. When you're using air induction nozzles, you can slow down, you can lower your pressure, and you can lower your boom. So if you follow all those steps, you're very much into low drift or no drift.
Should we talk about reading the label? I mean, just on the off chance that somebody wants to.
On the off chance, well, even for farmers now to go purchase a chemical, and different retailers and different seasons stock a different trade name, and so you virtually have to come to grips with, oh, what have we got this year? It's like a fashion parade. You know, there's probably 6 or 7 or 8 generics available on the market. Now, are they the same strength? Are they the same formulation? Are they compatible? Will you block your nozzles? What will happen by changing? So be careful, read the label, think about it, think about not only price, but the strength of the product, its formulation, and whether you're buying glue in a pot that won't come out and won't dissolve, or whether it's a nice smooth formulation that doesn't block nozzles and everything else.
And the spray that you get a gift with purchase with is not necessarily the best one.
No, don't go for the ham with the purchase of the chemical. So really, some of them probably, most of them are pretty good, but there is some coming from some sources that are not wonderful, and
that
some
aren't up to scratch.
And some companies do put a lot back into New Zealand agriculture. Others just import bulk drums and don't do trials and don't contribute too much.
This week's production tip.
Yes, Rob. A lot of farmers don't realise that there's an opportunity in a lot of crops to do a stale seed bed, either a Reglone or a Roundup if you're very, very careful, by placing something like a window, a decent sized window in a frame. As soon as you've sown your crop, put that over the rows. Now you'll create a glasshouse environment, and under that window, if you look every day, you'll get not only the crop coming up, you'll get a whole host of weeds. So that will give you a snapshot of the weeds that are going to be in that paddock when you have to spray the whole paddock. And if you're very, very careful and you've put the window out there to create the glasshouse effect straight away and look at it every day, as soon as that crop comes up under the window, go and put a litre of Roundup over the whole paddock and you'll get a stale seed bed.
Dennis, thank you very much indeed. Now, if you'd like to recap on any of the stories on this week's program, you can go to our website, which is ontheland.co.nz. I'm Rob Cope-Williams. You've either been watching or you just missed the program, but I will be back at the same time next week. Until then, bye now.